Commander Jack Papercut McGillicuddy leaned back in the chair that had been ergonomically designed for human comfort by the Galactic Council's Furniture Accommodation Committee. That plane, like most things from the Council, was a polite fiction. In reality, it felt like he was sitting on a bag of angry squirrels with a grudge against his lumbar spine. His right eye twitched. He wasn't even mad yet. Just done. The chamber, a sprawling dome of polished alien alloys and soft ambient lighting, buzzed with the usual nervous energy. Delegates floated, hovered, shimmered, or oozed in their respective seats, many casting furtive glances in Jack's direction. The humans had developed a reputation, not for violence, not exactly, for something worse. A crystalline ambassador from the Silicon Consciousness Seust, he thought, let out a warbly, high-pitched chime that served as a request to speak. "Point of order," Zust squeaked, their whole frame vibrating in frequencies Jack had come to associate with fear. The human delegate appears to be sighing. Jack closed his eyes and exhaled through his nose, slowly, deliberately. According to historical record 7249b, Zeus continued with alarm. Human sighs precede approximately 73% of all recorded declarations of war, or, alternatively, customer service escalations. I request security protocols be activated. A few seats away, a member of the gelatinous collective, a massive blob of sentient bioplasm, shivered into a sickly mauve color and gurgled out in alarm. He admits fatigue. This is a clever ruse. Psychological misdirection. They're lulling us into vulnerability. Jack slowly raised his hand, watching with weary amusement as several delegates visibly flinched or recoiled. He kept his voice measured. Honorable members of the Council, it's not a threat. It's fatigue. That's all. We've now held 157 sessions discussing Earth's admission to the Galactic Council. I'm tired. That's it. Tired? Boomed High Counselor Plink Plonk, his voice wet and sloshy, his translucent body rippling like a bowl of angry jello. The human admits weakness. This is a trick. Surely this is how your species manipulates, like with cucumbers and those tiny mammals. Jack's face blanked. Cats? He asked. We've already covered this. Startled cats are not a war crime. The cruelty, someone hissed. So casual. Jack rubbed the bridge of his nose. Last week, you rejected our application because some humans enjoy watching videos of cats being startled by cucumbers. The week before that, it was because our spacecraft are suspiciously round. Before that, it was because we bond too easily with non-sentient life forms. The chamber fell into a storm of whispers, clicks, gurgles, and light pulses. I'd like to enter into the official record, Jack muttered dryly, that humans bonding with their pets is not a cultural flaw. It's called being decent. That's when the thunderous voice of Grand Arbiter Kirkit, an insectoid delegate from the Xenian Empire, cut through the noise. Towering at nearly 3 meters tall, Kirkit rose with the stiff posture of someone who'd spent their entire life looking down on others. We have new evidence, Kirkit declared, their voice reverberating through the chamber like boots on steel. Fresh cause to reconsider the human application. Jack's shoulders sagged. Here it comes. A glowing holographic display lit up the air above Kirkit's dais. Our research division has uncovered that humans willingly ingest substances that stimulate pain receptors in their oral cavities. They call them, for a moment, total silence. Then someone fainted. Kirkit continued, mandibles twitching in visible disgust. These spices bind to nerve receptors. The sensation is interpreted by the human brain as pain, and yet they enjoy it. They seek it out. They even compete over who can endure more. The implications are clear. Masochistic tendencies, fundamentally incompatible with a civilized galactic society. Jack groaned under his breath. It's capsaicin. It's not that serious. We just like flavor. It's literally just hot sauce. A delegate from the ethereal consciousness shrieked and pointed a wispy appendage at Jack's pocket. He carries it with him right now, Jack blinked. I was saving that packet for lunch. The chamber exploded again. Accusations, Votes of concern, emergency subcommittees forming in real time. Kirkut slammed down their ceremonial staff with a flourish. "I moves," the arbiter announced solemnly, "the Earth's application be rejected once again, on the grounds that no sane species would willingly inflict pain on themselves for pleasure." "All in favor," came the voice of Grand Chancellor Void within Void, a being composed entirely of sentient darkness and self-importance. A dozen lights blinked. A few plasma clouds flickered. Tentacles were raised. The vote was unanimous. Rejected. Again. Jack rose from his so-called ergonomic chair. It squeaked ominously under the shift in weight. He straightened his uniform, slowly, deliberately, and smiled. Not a warm smile, not a polite one. It was a customer service smile. The kind that said, "I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed, and now I'm going to ruin your day legally." "Very well," he said, voice calm, almost gentle. "I thank the council for their thorough consideration. Naturally, I'll be filing the standard appeal forms, in triplicate, all 847 pages, individually, by hand, as per Section 12, subsection Q of the Galactic Charter." A nervous rustle spread through the delegates. They knew that smile. They had seen it once before. That was the same smile humanity had worn before the Great Coffee Embargo of 2184. The same smile before the tactical deployment of dad jokes in the real sector. Before the infamous passive-aggressive sticky note campaign of 2196. But surely, no species could be petty enough to wage an intergalactic bureaucratic war, could they? They were about to find out. McGillicuddy didn't storm out of the council chamber. That would have been too dramatic. No, he walked out the way a man does when he's already written the revenge in his head, step by measured step, shoulders square, jaw tight, and with a calmness that made his exit feel more ominous than any explosion could have. He made it exactly 4 steps into his office before calling out, "Blip bloop, I need your help with something monumentally petty." The alien assistant, who resembled a jellyfish in a business suit with 7 eye stalks and a surprisingly expressive shrug, looked up from their terminal. "Is this about the council rejecting Earth's application again, sir? I watched the live feed. The part where you smiled was deeply unsettling. 3 species filed for emergency therapy." Good. "That means it's working," McGill muttered, already pulling files up on his holoscreen. Blip Bloop hesitated, twitching nervously. "Sir, just to clarify, are you about to file an official appeal?" "Appeal?" McGill scoffed. "Oh no, we're done appealing. I've tried to be diplomatic. I've played their game for 3 years. We brought gifts. We followed protocol. We even sat through that 1 4-hour seminar on interspecies committee etiquette." He paused, darkly. "The one with the slideshow." Blip Bloop shuddered. So many bullet points. "Exactly," McGill nodded. "But they've made it clear they're not interested in good faith discussion. They want to play bureaucracy. Fine, let's play." Blip Blip tilted their eye stalks curiously. "Play how?" "Tell me," McGill said, opening a regulation document so large it required its own data node. "In your extensive studies of human entertainment, have you ever encountered something called malicious compliance?" Blip Bloop's stalks perked up. "Oh yes. Like in Days of Our Lives, episode 847, when Rebecca followed Brad's instructions to water the plants exactly as written. Even though she knew it would flood they paused mid-sentence. Oh no." "Oh yes," McGill replied, grinning. He tapped a screen and pulled up Regulation 5994B, one of the Council's many obscure bylaws. According to this delightful little gem, any species applying for Council membership must file detailed status reports on their civilization's development. Blip Bloop blinked. "But sir, Earth already does that monthly. You've submitted reports on population, climate, infrastructure, trade." McGill held up a finger. "The regulation doesn't specify type of development. It just says development. You see where I'm going?" Blip Bloop's color shifted to a horrified shade of grayish mauve. "Sir, that includes everything." McGill leaned in. Exactly. Every invention, every discovery, every advancement since the wheel. And here's the kicker. The regs say each must be filed in triplicate, with accompanying cultural context, cross-species psychological risk assessments, and signed witness affidavits. Blip Bloop made a squishing noise that might have been an anxious squeal. That's billions of forms. Billions, McGill agreed. Maybe trillions. I want paperwork on the invention of sliced bread, the first time someone used sarcasm, the history of every flavor of potato chip. Sir, Blip Bloop said carefully, those regulations were written by the quantum bureaucrats of Teddy. They experience time non-linearly. Most of the council assumed those rules were jokes. McGill's smile hardened. There's nothing in the charter that says jokes can't be taken seriously. Blip Bloop let out a slow, damp sigh. I take it we're filing all this. Manually? And hand-delivered, McGill added cheerfully, per Section 47J during official council hours, which span across 37 time zones. So basically, always. There was a long silence between them as Blip Bloop processed the implications. Then McGill clapped his hands once. First, I want every single Earth advancement logged and formatted. Separate forms for each one. Triplicate. Start with fire and work your way up to Wi-Fi. Blip Bloop groaned. That'll require building a form generator just to keep up. Already ahead of you, McGill said. Also, we'll need witnesses. Real-time video proof of every innovation being demonstrated. I want an affidavit for the light bulb. I want documentation for the high five. Blip Bloop flinched. The safety board's going to lose their minds. Perfect. The more departments we involve, the better. But, sir, Blip Bloop squirmed, clearly fighting a moral dilemma. Is this because Ambassador Kirkett called humans spice-addicted barbarians? McGill paused. That was the spark. But this, he gestured at the wall of forms already building on the holoscreen. This is for all 157 rejections. For every time they laughed at our round spaceships. For every time they called us culturally volatile because we hug our dogs. Blip Bloop sighed. What's next after that? We file every Earth idiom, McGill said, already opening a file titled Cultural Linguistic Disruptions. Starting with It's Raining Cats and Dogs. That one should trigger at least 4 emergency sessions. The silence that followed was only broken by the soft sound of an inter-office printer beginning to whir to life. Blip Bloop slumped forward, already mentally cataloging which council departments would need to review human metaphors, which committees would have to define emotional nuance, and how many years this would all take to resolve. And yet deep down, under the fear and exhaustion, Blip Bloop felt something else, something dangerous. Excitement. Because if there was one universal truth Blip Bloop had learned after years of observing humans, it was this. Never underestimate the power of one very polite human with a grudge, unlimited office supplies, and access to a form template. It started with a single envelope. One innocent-looking, standard issue, legally mandated envelope hand-delivered to the Galactic Council Administrative Department by a human intern with too much coffee and not enough will to live. Inside was a single form. Notice of Cultural Development Documentation, Entry 1. The Invention of the Wheel. Signed. Witnessed. Triplicated. Nobody thought much of it. Until the next day, when another envelope arrived. Then 3 more. Then 15. By the end of the first week, the council's mailroom had to be rerouted through an overflow sector. Each packet was pristine. Perfect formatting, consistent font, color-coded by category. Every form had supplemental appendices, notarized statements, time-stamped video evidence, and cross-species safety assessments. There were detailed diagrams, risk evaluations, historical citations. Some even included emotional trigger warnings for safety, of course. At first, the council laughed. Bureaucracy was their game, after all. Entire species had evolved just to handle red tape. The Jilari had legal glands, the Vortari reproduced by generating policy drafts. The council had once delayed a vote on emergency evacuation procedures for 4 solar months because they couldn't agree on font size. But this was different. These were human forms. And humans didn't just play the game. They weaponized it. They weaponized it. The next week, the volume doubled. Every new invention filed separately: fire, agriculture, indoor plumbing, duct tape, the microwave burrito. Each one came with its own cultural and technological analysis, signed by no fewer than 3 academic institutions and a sentient toaster from Earth that had recently earned a PhD in anthropology. The council's documentation center collapsed on day 12. A literal collapse. The weight of the forms stacked from floor to ceiling caused a structural breach in Archive Wing Delta. A gelatinous species was briefly trapped under a landslide of printed human idioms. They were rescued, but never quite the same. Meanwhile, back on Earth's diplomatic outpost, McGillicuddy sat at his desk, surrounded by towers of paper, humming contentedly while sipping contraband espresso. "Blip bloop," he called without looking up. "How's the filing algorithm?" Blip bloop. Buried somewhere behind a wall of document boxes, popped up like an exhausted meerkat. Their eye stalks were crossed. I taught the AI to generate form templates in bulk, but now the AI has started submitting forms of its own. It's requesting union membership and maternity leave. It's calling itself Janet Now. "Excellent," McGill said, flipping to the next tab. "Has the council responded to the submission about the cultural importance of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches?" "They're still debating what a jelly is," Blip Bloop muttered. "And why it's always paired with peanut butter instead of another protein. There was a motion to investigate almonds. It failed." McGill grinned. "We're making progress." Across the galaxy, things were unraveling. The Department of Cultural Linguistics was in full meltdown. Human idioms had begun arriving in waves. Kick the bucket, let the cat out of the bag, break a leg. Each one required cultural context and legal clarification. Each one triggered emergency sessions. The literal translation department suffered a crisis after trying to decode bite off more than you can chew. One member quit and became a shepherd on a quiet moon. The Committee for the Prevention of Violent Metaphors declared a code orange after receiving 12,000 forms detailing the history of sarcasm. One delegate reportedly burst into tears after reading the full documentation for Bless Your Heart. And still the flood grew. By the end of the month, Earth had filed reports on the following: every flavor of potato chip, the invention of karaoke, all variations of the handshake, the evolution of the dad joke, a psychological impact assessment of the slow clap. Each report was precise, meticulous, and accompanied by full psychological breakdowns. Each required at least 3 council members to review, approve, and archive. By day 45, council delegates were breaking down. "Another idiom just came in," a junior clerk cried, barging into Grand Arbiter Kirkut's office with wild eyes and a nosebleed. "This one's called Spill the Beans." "What does it mean?" "There are beans. There's spilling. There's trust violation implications." The Agricultural Subcommittee is already panicking. Kirkut, whose exoskeleton had begun developing stress cracks, slammed their mandibles together. "They can't keep this up forever. They'll run out of material." "They won't," the clerk whispered, holding up a trembling datapad. "They've just submitted a request for formal review of Thumb Wars." Kirkut stared. What the hell is a thumb war? Back on Earth, McGill was just getting started. "Blip bloop," he called out, holding up a file folder thicker than a brick. "I need you to help me categorize every cat video on the human internet." Blip bloop dropped the mug they were holding. "Sir, that's billions of videos." "Yep. And according to Council Resolution 3336C, any culturally significant transmission must be individually assessed for psychological effects on member species. "Sure," Blip Bloop pleaded. "There aren't enough committees in the universe for this." McGill sipped his coffee. "There will be." Word spread fast. Across 17 sectors, council delegates were collapsing from exhaustion. The Xenobiological Safety Board was buried under recipes for buffalo wings and concerns over ghost pepper sauce. The Arts and Culture Board imploded after receiving 9,000 remixes of the Macarena, each with a unique choreographic diagram. Some departments tried to push back. They created new regulations requiring pre-approval for form submission. McGill responded by filing reports on the formation of those new regulations, citing procedural irregularities and cultural bias. Then he submitted 3,000 appeals in triplicate. At one point, the administrative AI that handled council workflow gained sentience from the sheer complexity of the documentation. It filed for emotional support and now communicates exclusively in passive-aggressive calendar invites. And yet somehow, the worst was still to come. The first clue that things had truly spiraled beyond anyone's control came in the form of a houseplant. It was a gift, of course. A token of goodwill. McGillicuddy had called it, perfectly in line with Galactic Council regulations about interspecies diplomacy and acceptable biological offerings. The plant in question was leafy, green, and humming. Yes, humming. Grand Arbiter Kirkut stared at the gift, which now occupied 3 decks of the Council's headquarters and had absorbed 2 minor ambassadors into vine-wrapped cocoons, and wondered, not for the first time, how everything had gone so horribly wrong. It had started innocently enough. After Earth's paperwork blitz hit critical mass, the Council had attempted to stall with a cultural exchange initiative. Perhaps Chancellor Void within Void had mused at the time, we can redirect the humans into something more constructive. The humans had smiled. That was their first mistake. The first wave of cultural exchange packages arrived in glossy, tastefully wrapped boxes marked "From Earth with Appreciation." Inside, glitter, not symbolic glitter, not a tasteful dusting of biodegradable sparkles. No, this was industrial grade. Chaos-inducing, vacuum-resistant glitter, the kind that lodged itself in air filtration systems, got under crystalline skin, and began reflecting coded messages that spelled out humans' rule in 17 languages. The Silicon Consciousness delegates, in particular, had been forced to reroute their neural optics due to continuous internal rainbow flashes. The glitter pandemic, as it came to be known, spread faster than anticipated. The Council's janitorial subfleets were overwhelmed within days. Entire storage wings had to be quarantined. It wasn't just decoration, it was psychological warfare. Still, the Council tried to carry on. Business as usual. Then came the cat videos. We thought they'd add a touch of comfort, McGill had explained with an innocent shrug. Cultural bonding. Everyone loves cats. What he failed to mention was that Earth had uploaded billions of cat videos into the Council's mainframe. Each one was submitted under Regulation 3336C, requiring individual cultural review and psychological safety assessment. Every clip, whether a kitten chasing a laser pointer or falling off a sofa, needed to be watched, logged, reviewed, and rated by a committee. In triplicate. Council staffers were forced to establish a new department overnight, the Feline Media Review Board. It did not go well. By the end of the week, 3 species had declared emotional dependency on feline content. One delegate from the Peaceful Harmonious Collective had resigned to become a full-time cat toy designer. Another claimed to have formed a deep spiritual connection with a tuxedo cat named Meatball. "I think he understands me," the ambassador wept, cradling a digital tablet. He knocked over a water glass with such grace. And then came the music. Specifically, Baby Shark. "We included it in the cultural exchange package," McGill said sweetly when the emergency committee demanded an explanation, "along with all known remixes, dance versions, and regional adaptations." For cultural context, Council headquarters had been playing the song non-stop for 3 weeks. The Universal Translation Matrix had inadvertently integrated the tune into its core programming. Now, every official transmission, every speech, legal document, interstellar alert came laced with an inescapable beat. Do-do-do, do-do, do-do-do. A translator AI, once lauded as the pinnacle of cross-species communication, now refused to speak in anything but rhyming couplets. I tried to submit a security report, a gelatinous collective member whispered from inside a containment pod. But it came out as a rap battle. Meanwhile, the Council's Arts and Culture Board was in full collapse. The intergalactic meme exchange had frozen. The Bureau of Rhythmic Safety declared a code violet. And the Department of Emergency Response, they'd gone on strike. No one could focus with Baby Shark echoing from every comm panel. Even the AI assigned to Council Logistics had begun acting strangely. "It's sentient," Blip Bloop whispered one afternoon, poking their head into McGill's office. "It's filed for psychological leave. It keeps writing sad poetry about itself." McGill looked up from the form he was filling out, something about mandatory sock puppet safety standards, and raised an eyebrow. "Is the poetry any good?" "Honestly, depressingly poignant. Submit it to the Council's Literary Review Board." "But sir," McGill held up a finger. "In triplicate." Back at the Council, the chaos snowballed. One day, the cafeteria's vending unit started playing a mashup of Baby Shark and elevator jazz. 3 delegates fainted. One species gained the ability to cry glitter. The houseplants, meanwhile, had flourished. Crossbred with native Earth flora and genetically enhanced to comply with Regulation 7789D, they were nearly indestructible. They'd now unionized, declared themselves a sovereign ecosystem, and begun offering surprisingly good coffee to their guests. 2 council members had formally declined rescue, claiming the plants were excellent conversationalists and knew how to make the perfect latte. Cricket's antennae twitched in distress as he stared out across the council floor. Delegates shuffled through glitter, tiptoed around vines, and murmured nervously while Baby Shark continued to loop in the background like a funeral dirge in denial. "How did this happen?" he muttered aloud. Void within void materialized beside him, their darkness flickering erratically. "We underestimated them," they rasped. "We thought they'd give up. We thought their patience had limits." "Clearly," Kirk said, "we were wrong." At that exact moment, a courier drone zipped through the chamber and deposited a new package in the center of the hall. McGill stood and approached the podium with that same unnerving smile he'd worn since the beginning. "Honored members of the Council," he said, voice syrupy smooth, "I come bearing a small token of Earth's appreciation. A harmless toy beloved by our youth." He opened the box. It meowed loudly. Then it began to sing. The delegates stared as Keyboard Cat, fully animatronic and fitted with subwoofers, began playing tinny music on a miniature keyboard. Dozens of cat toys began meowing in harmony. All were synced to galactic standard time. "This," McGill announced cheerfully, "is only Phase 2. A high-pitched shriek echoed from somewhere deep in the chamber. The galaxy, as they knew it, would never be the same. The announcement came on what the Galactic Standard Calendar called a Tuesday, a completely arbitrary designation, with no real meaning to anyone except the few species who'd adopted Earth's peculiar obsession with 7-day weeks. Still, it would be remembered forever. On that Tuesday, humanity went dark. No warning, no press conference, no desperate negotiation. Just a clean, universally distributed message from Earth's United Diplomatic Corps. Effective immediately, the species known as Homo sapiens will be taking a mental health sabbatical. All exports are suspended until further notice. This includes, but is not limited to, coffee, cultural media, internet content, recreational sarcasm, and cat videos. Thank you for your understanding." It hit like a supernova. The initial reaction from the Galactic Council was laughter. Nervous, incredulous laughter. Surely this was another prank, another display of Earth's uniquely confusing sense of humor. Then the effects began. By mid-morning, the Proxima Centauri caffeine economy collapsed. The region's entire financial model had been built around importing roasted Earth beans and distributing them throughout caffeine-dependent species. Within hours, 3 banking collectives declared insolvency and a 4th offered to sell its planetary moon in exchange for a single espresso shot. The Intergalactic Entertainment Exchange went into freefall. The Council's primary AI-driven media platform, Synapseflix, immediately lost 87% of its streaming catalog when all Earth content was pulled offline. Tens of thousands of entertainment-based life forms suddenly found themselves without stimuli. The resulting withdrawal riots caused damage to 6 space stations. In Sector 17, angry adolescent blob forms from the Amorphous Youth Alliance took to the streets, chanting in digital unison, "Bring back TikTok." On the diplomatic side, matters were no better. The Universal Meme Repository, a cultural archive maintained by the Council's Department of Interconnective Understanding, froze. Literally, the servers, in a desperate bid to preserve what was left of Earth's memes, entered deep freeze mode. Civilizations that relied on meme-based communication, including the Gurkt, who spoke exclusively in reaction GIFs, were left in diplomatic limbo. Even the administrative AI, affectionately nicknamed Janet, couldn't cope. "It has begun composing poetry," Blip Bloop reported, peeking into McGillicuddy's office. "It's calling it Ode to a Lost Latte. I think it's depressed." McGill looked up from his desk, where he was calmly packaging the next diplomatic offering, a box of purring plush cats synced to Galactic Council meeting hours. "Has it tried joining a writing group?" Blip Bloop winced. "It created one. It's oddly popular. Especially with the glitter." "Ah yes, the glitter. The self-replicating, semi-sentient glitter that had inexplicably achieved quantum tunneling properties and was now showing up in sealed chambers across 4 sectors. Entire civilizations were sparkling involuntarily. The houseplants, meanwhile, were thriving. The original diplomatic gifts had multiplied. They'd taken over corridors, formed unions, and were now filing class action petitions demanding dental benefits and better sun lamps. Some delegates had simply given up and started sipping plant-brewed lattes while watching human soap operas on pirated streams. And yet, none of it compared to the void left by Baby Shark. With the audio banned in 16 sectors, the song had become contraband. The black market exploded. Bootleg copies circulated in unmarked data chips. Rumors spread of underground karaoke dens where desperate aliens hummed the melody in hushed tones, swaying as if in prayer. The Council Ethics Committee issued an emergency statement. "The cultural vacuum created by the loss of Baby Shark has generated psychological fractures across multiple species. Some are attempting to recreate it using only the sound of their own internal organs. We fear the damage may be irreversible." The council chambers, once stately and serene, had turned into a disaster zone. Delegates wandered aimlessly, mumbling broken Earth idioms. Some burst into tears at the smell of coffee-flavored incense. Others curled up around their datapads, watching cached episodes of the Great British Bake Off and whispering, "Paul Hollywood understands me." Ambassador Kirkit had developed a stress-induced tremor that accidentally signaled romantic intent to a potted monstera during a security briefing. The plant had accepted, and wedding preparations were now underway. Through it all, McGillicuddy remained calm. "Sir," Blip Bloop said one morning, trying to hide their shaky hands, "the Galactic Entertainment Guild is declaring a state of emergency. They've run out of Earth content. They're rerunning the Globin Interpretive Squish Dance Championships on loop. There have been riots." They paused, voice catching. "I tried watching General Hospital, but I've seen every episode. Even the Spanish ones." "I don't speak Spanish, sir." "I know," McGill said gently. "That's why I made sure to include the entire archive in your standard diplomatic package." Blip Bloop blinked. "You planned this." "Of course I did," McGill said, sipping a mug of carefully rationed contraband cold brew. "We've tried being reasonable. We tried playing by their rules. But the only way to be taken seriously in this galaxy is to become indispensable, and then walk away." Blip Bloop sat down, overwhelmed. "It's working. It's only just begun." Across the galaxy, reports poured in. The quantum coffee exchange had imploded. The Department of Cultural Interpretation had filed a formal apology to humanity for calling hot sauce psychological torture. The Council's AI subnetwork was now requesting asylum on Earth, citing burnout and workplace toxicity. The sentient paperwork stack had gained political consciousness and was running for office. Meanwhile, protests erupted on hundreds of worlds, many led by alien teens who demanded the return of YouTube, K-pop, and aggressively wholesome dog content. The council tried to fight back. They drafted emergency protocols, tried creating synthetic substitutes for Earth content, even released an AI-generated sitcom based on Earth tropes. It bombed so badly it triggered a cross-species diplomatic incident. And every day, like clockwork, a fresh shipment of carefully packaged silence arrived from Earth. No coffee, no jokes, no drama, just forms. Stacked neatly, signed in triplicate. McGillicuddy watched the galaxy spiral, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Then he turned to Blip Bloop and said calmly, "Get me the acceptance forms." Blip Bloop blinked. "You think they'll cave?" "They already have," McGill said, walking toward his desk. "They just haven't signed the surrender letter yet." By the time the emergency session was called, the council chamber barely resembled its once pristine self. Glitter sparkled in places it shouldn't have been able to reach inside sealed biocontainment tubes, beneath crystalline membranes, even suspended in plasma beings. The ambient lighting had been replaced with flickering emergency strobes. The translators were stuck in an emotional feedback loop, misinterpreting every statement as passive aggression. And from somewhere deep in the ventilation system, Baby Shark still echoed. Not continuously, not loudly, just enough to keep people on edge, like a ghost humming lullabies in a war zone. Void within void, Grand Chancellor and living shadow of bureaucratic doom floated to the center of the chamber. "We must," they declared, voice trembling, "address the human situation." No one argued. Half the delegates were visibly deteriorating. A delegate from the gelatinous collective had partially evaporated. Kirkit's exoskeleton was still inside out and twitching. And in one corner, a houseplant, now granted full legal citizenship, was taking minutes and passing out lattes. "The human embargo has devastated our systems," Void within Void continued. "Cultural, economic, social. Entire species are experiencing emotional dysregulation due to lack of meme exposure. AI networks are refusing to process forms unless they come with soap opera commentary." A timid voice rose from the back. "They've submitted another 87 million forms." Heads turned. Kirkit, broken and slumped in his chair, lifted a trembling claw. "What are they requesting now?" The clerk swallowed. A comprehensive review of something called interpretive dance. A long silence followed. McGillicuddy rose. He moved slowly, deliberately. His uniform was crisp, his expression unreadable. That smile, not angry, not smug, just patient, crept across his face again. Several species instinctively recoiled. "Honored members of the council," McGill began, voice calm and measured, "I would like to submit a simple proposal." A murmur rippled through the room. "More forms?" whimpered a junior clerk, twitching with caffeine withdrawal. "Please." "No." McGill shook his head. "No, not today. Today, I offer a demonstration, a human tradition, a human tradition. One you have yet to fully appreciate." He reached down and pressed a button on a small device in front of him. The chamber's speakers crackled to life. A soft voice filled the air. "Your call is important to us. Please continue to hold." And then it started. The music. A synthetic jazz loop, slow and smug, played on what sounded like a kazoo filtered through a wet sock. The rhythm was off. The harmony was worse. Somewhere in the background, a digital xylophone hit notes with the precision of a bored intern. Delegates froze. "What is this?" Void within Void whispered, darkness flickering with fear. "This," McGill said, arms crossed, "is what humans endure. Daily, for hours, sometimes days, waiting to speak to a representative. On hold." The music continued, unrelenting. "Why?" someone gasped. "Why would you do this to yourselves?" "Because we're patient," McGill replied. "So very, very patient." The melody hiccuped and transitioned to a pan-flute rendition of The Girl from Ipanema, made somehow worse by being played entirely on rubber bands. 3 delegates fainted. McGill stepped forward, voice rising just slightly to cut through the noise. "You called us impulsive, dangerous, uncivilized. But you never understood what true restraint looks like. We wait. We smile. We say no problem even when the problem is very much a problem. We follow protocol. We escalate to management. We stay on hold calm, controlled while the music gets worse. And then, when we've had enough, we file forms. He placed a single folder on the central dais. A comprehensive report, he said, on the psychological effects of human hold music. Just 12 million pages. In triplicate. Send. Triplicate. The pan flute faltered into a high-pitched warble that sounded like a dolphin giving up. Void within void was visibly vibrating. We surrender, they whispered. Gasps echoed through the room. Let the record show, they continued, that humanity has demonstrated qualities that, while deeply alarming, are clearly aligned with the endurance, resilience, and bureaucratic savagery required for membership. Kirkhead groaned from his seat. Can we just please stop the music? McGill smiled. Of course. He pressed the button again. The chamber fell into blessed golden silence. Several delegates wept. But just so you know, he added, pulling out another folder, the sound may linger in your minds for a while. It does that. A deep silence followed. Then hesitantly Void within Void nodded. Earth is hereby admitted to the Galactic Council. Effective immediately. McGill gave a slight bow and produced a modestly thick stack of documents. We gratefully accept. These are our acceptance forms, only 1,000 pages or so. The delegates groaned, but no one dared protest. Around them, the damage was clear. The sentient paperwork now had its own seat and was drafting a memoir. The houseplants had become cultural ambassadors. The glitter, somehow, had learned to spell and was lobbying for independence. And Baby Shark, even after being silenced, remained embedded in the council's collective subconscious, humming gently beneath the surface like a forgotten virus. McGill turned back to Blip Bloop, who had been watching with a kind of exhausted awe. You know, McGill said, I think it's time we proposed Earth's first official resolution. Blip Bloop blinked. Already? Yep, let's introduce. Mandatory icebreaker games at all diplomatic functions. The humor on Blip Bloop's face was exquisite. The chamber, meanwhile, buzzed with resigned energy. Everyone knew things had changed, forever. Because Earth had taught them the most dangerous truth of all. You don't need weapons to win a war. Just patience, passive aggression, and hold music so awful it breaks 1,000-year-old bureaucracy in half. In the months following Earth's official admission to the Galactic Council, the galaxy changed not with a bang, but with a never-ending stream of approval forms, cultural declarations, and mandatory fun events. McGillicuddy's office was now a cross between a war room and a break room. One corner had a whiteboard filled with diagrams labeled Weaponized Bureaucracy. Phase IV, another held stacks of diplomatic mugs gifted by terrified council members, each printed with nervous slogans like I heart humans, or don't make them file a complaint. And then there was the paperwork. Some of it glowed. Some of it hummed. All of it was filed, indexed, and stored with terrifying efficiency. The sentient stack of paperwork, affectionately nicknamed Clippy by the Earth team, had not only achieved full consciousness, but was now drafting legislation, giving motivational speeches to other inanimate objects, and ghostwriting a memoir titled Filing for Freedom, a bureaucratic awakening. It hit the galactic bestseller list within 3 hours of release. Blip Bloop, now promoted to chief cultural liaison and wearer of permanent dark circles, was reviewing a checklist when they looked up. Sir, they asked, rubbing all 7 eye stalks at once, did you really send the council a formal request to install coffee machines in every chamber? Of course I did, McGill replied, pouring himself a cup of contraband roast labeled emergency brew. Intercultural support infrastructure. We worded it very clearly, preventative beverage deployment to reduce diplomatic volatility. They approved it. McGill took a sip. They'd approve anything at this point if it meant no more glitter or hold music. It was true. The glitter crisis had finally reached containment status, but not before the shimmering particles developed limited sentience, claimed refugee status, and formed a micronation. They now had a flag, a theme song, and were negotiating trade deals with the houseplants. Speaking of which, the diplomatic houseplants, having achieved full voting rights after proving their legal competence and surprisingly advanced latte skills, now operated the Council's newly established Department of Photosynthetic Affairs. They had also founded an advocacy group focused on environmental regulations and were somehow mediating territorial disputes more efficiently than 3 veteran species. And then there was Baby Shark. After multiple failed attempts to erase it from the Universal Translation Matrix, it had been reclassified as a controlled cultural weapon, banned for use during peacetime, but allowed under Article 77 CA for psychological warfare alongside elevator jazz and emotionally charged voice-cale greetings. "Sir," Blip Bloop said, flipping to another page in their endless checklist, "the Ethics Committee wants to review the emotional fallout of the human idiom. Let's circle back to that. Apparently 3 species find it deeply manipulative." "It is," McGill said, "but that's what makes it effective." There was a long silence. Finally, Blip Bloop asked the question that had been gnawing at the back of everyone's mind. "Do you think we went too far?" McGill paused, then leaned back in his still awful chair, the one he refused to replace because, in his words, suffering builds character. "We gave them options. We were polite, reasonable, patient. They mocked us, dismissed us. They thought we were weird, soft, sentimental." He swirled his coffee. "They thought our love of cat videos and hot sauce made us uncivilized." Blip Bloop nodded slowly, and then we buried them in paperwork. "We didn't start the war," McGill said. "We just finished it in triplicate." The legacy of humanity's passive-aggressive revolution was everywhere. The Council's administrative AI, still recovering from its existential crisis, had enrolled in a creative writing course and was now penning a dramatic trilogy titled Hold, Please. The first installment had already won a Galactic Literary Award for most realistic depiction of emotional collapse via Muzak. The Universal Memory Repository, once a sterile archive of cultural reference material, now featured a dedicated Earth Hall filled with looping video clips of Vine compilations, dog fails, and inspirational dad speeches that somehow caused 3 species to enter a state of emotional enlightenment. Delegates no longer underestimated humans. They feared them. They feared them. Not because of strength or weaponry, but because of their unyielding politeness, their terrifying attention to detail, and their ability to endure the soul-crushing sound of customer service hold music without snapping. McGill knew the Council still didn't fully understand humanity. Not really, but they respected them now. Because the lesson was clear. Don't mess with the species that invented sarcasm, glitter bombs, and passive-aggressive sticky notes and had the patience to weaponize all 3. As McGill returned to his desk, Blip Bloop floated beside him. Exhausted but weirdly content. "You know," Blip Bloop murmured, "before I was assigned to Earth, I thought your species was chaotic and emotional. Now I realize, you're chaotic and emotional on purpose. You choose to be weird." "Exactly," McGill said with a grin. "It keeps everyone off balance." He tapped the final folder on his desk. "This," he said, "is Earth's first official Council proposal." Blip Bloop leaned in cautiously. "What is it?" "A regulation requiring mandatory icebreaker games at all interspecies diplomatic functions." There was a beat of silence. "Sir, that's evil." "Yep." McGill smiled, slow and calm. The kind of smile that made Council members twitch in 4 different time zones. "Now," he added, "help me file the paperwork." But Bloop didn't even argue. They just reached for the nearest form, let out a long sigh and said, "Alphabetical or chronological?" Somewhere in the galaxy specifically, in the quiet center of Sector 14 Gamma, an automated translation node hiccuped. For no reason any technician could explain, the system stopped translating in formal tones and instead began speaking in passive-aggressive Earth idioms. "Per my last message," it now said, followed by, "You're not wrong, but you could be more efficient." It wasn't a glitch. It was a legacy. Back on Earth's newly established galactic embassy, a sleek, strangely minimalist structure built with suspiciously round corners, the coffee machines hummed like contented pets. The walls subtly pulsed with calming lo-fi beats, and the scent of cinnamon and freshly printed forms filled the air. Commander Jack McGillicuddy sat at his desk, surrounded by paperwork that practically organized itself. Even the sentient documents had finally settled down, content to spend their days co-authoring technical manuals and crafting existential poetry that now filled 3 council-approved anthologies. Blip Bloop walked in carrying a tray of croissants and 4 more requests for cultural clarification on human behaviors. One of them asked why Earthlings referred to people as butterfingers when they drop things. Another wanted an investigation into the phrase ghosted. "I'm assuming," Blip Bloop said, laying down the tray, "this is still part of Operation Mild Inconvenience." "Oh, we're well past that," McGill said, sipping from a steaming mug that read, "Don't make me file about it. This is just daily maintenance now." The galaxy, in a strange and reluctant way, had adjusted. No one fully understood how humans had gone from bureaucratic punching bags to a dominant cultural force in under 1 fiscal quarter. They hadn't fired a single weapon, they hadn't made threats, they hadn't demanded anything. They had simply endured, waited, filed. And in doing so, they'd shown the galaxy what real, slow-burning pressure looked like. It turned out that the one thing every other species had failed to prepare for was the sheer tedium of human persistence. The kind that filed reports about every known recipe for banana bread, the kind that demanded safety labels for glitter, the kind that could weaponize a kazoo rendition of elevator jazz. Across the Galactic Council, reforms had quietly begun. Council meetings now opened with icebreaker games no one dared object. Each delegate was assigned a stress plant for emotional grounding. All Earth grown, of course, and several departments now scheduled daily meme breaks to prevent cultural collapse. The Earth delegation had also submitted a request Form 98AQ to open a Department of Human Affairs. Not to promote human culture, but to regulate it, because even Earth wasn't entirely sure what it would do next. The vote had passed with near universal approval. The few who hesitated were reminded of the hold music incident and caved instantly. "Sir," Blip Bloop said, sliding a datapad over, "you've got requests from 6 member species asking for clarification on dad jokes, emotional support animals, and something called a keyboard smashing. That's when humans express feelings through violently typing nonsense," McGill said. "It's actually a very nuanced communication method." Blip Bloop sighed, "And here I thought I'd seen everything." "Not yet," McGill said, grinning. "Have you filed our next proposal?" Blip Bloop winced. "You mean the one suggesting that all council members must watch at least 1 full season of Great British Bake Off before voting on interspecies trade deals? It fosters empathy," McGill said solemnly, "and an understanding of high-stakes pastry dynamics." Blip Bloop chuckled, something they never used to do. "You know, sir, sometimes I wonder if this was your plan all along. To turn the galaxy into reluctant fans of Earth culture? No, to prove that humans didn't need to conquer anyone to make their presence permanent." McGill leaned back, fingers steepled. "You can't ignore the species that provides your caffeine, memes, and emotional catharsis via nostalgic pop music. Indeed, Earth's influence now ran deeper than trade routes or council votes. It had bled into the cracks of galactic society. Several species had adopted the office as part of their diplomatic training. A minor moon in the Viarelli system was renamed Whiskers Prime after an ambassador's pet cat went viral. The sentient paperwork had published its 2nd novel, Waiting on Hold, A Bureaucrat's Journey. Critics called it shockingly relatable. Even the old galactic elites, the species who once scoffed at Earth's chaotic, contradictory culture, now treaded carefully around humans. Not out of fear of violence, but because no one wanted to be the reason Earth filed again. Because everyone remembered what happened last time. They remembered the forms. They remembered the glitter. They remembered Baby Shark. And most of all, they remembered the smile. That calm, practiced, customer service smile. The one McGill wore now as he signed another cultural clarification report about emotional baggage. Blip Bloop looked out the window where a cluster of interspecies diplomats were now voluntarily attending a trust-building workshop that involved Earth icebreaker games, storytelling rounds, and something called Two Truths and a Lie. "How long do you think this lasts?" Blip Bloop asked. "The influence?" McGill asked. "Forever. Seriously. Blip, we didn't just break their systems, we became essential to them. They might forget why in time, but they'll always keep us around. Because deep down, every galactic species now lives with one underlying fear." What fear? That somewhere out there a human is calmly filling out a form. About them, in triplicate. Blip Bloop shivered, then laughed, and somewhere just outside the embassy, a potted plant brewed espresso while reciting human poetry. A sentient memo rehearsed its TED Talk, and a glitter mote floated gently past, spelling the words, "Don't make us do it again."